Thanks, Chair. My question's to NAB. When you say you don't want to exclude people and you want people to have choice, how can you possibly expect us to take you seriously when you have been closing down branches in the regions and metropolitan areas without due consultation?
I note that question may not be relevant to this particular bill inquiry, but I'll ask for an answer from NAB.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Chair. Look, it's out of my area of direct responsibility and also my expertise to address branch closures, and I believe there's a separate Senate inquiry that will cover that in much greater detail.
It does impact it, because ultimately, if you can't go to your branch to set up an ID in the local area, you're not going to have a lot of choice, and you are going to have to travel further to set up your ID. But anyway, I'll leave that as a comment. My next question, and I'm happy for anyone to have a crack at answering this, is I'm a little bit confused, or there seems to be ambiguous between who's going to administer the digital ID. So I've got here in one part it says the digital ID regulator, but then further down I've got Services Australia are going to actually administer digital ID. And how do you then, in the private sector, expect to interact with the digital ID regulator, knowing that I would have thought if digital ID was one of the potential advantages of digital ID, putting aside the whole coercive side of it, is that you've got a one-stop shopping. So are you guys going to have your own form of digital ID, and then the government's going to have another form of digital ID? Not taking into account, for example, we've already got MyGov, which is sort of already a pseudo form of digital ID. How is this all going to interact, and are we going to have one-stop shopping in terms of one ID? Or is the private sector going to have a different ID for every little service they provide, and the government's going to have a digital ID for the services they provide?
We might start with Payments Plus.
Yes, I'm happy to open with that, and then I'll get Andrew to share the work we've been doing. But thank you for the question, Senator. We do believe, and this comes to some of the recommendations that we've made and others have made around phasing. It also directly hits, I think, on an earlier question about what if a system is down. And so the role that we play at Australian Payments Plus as a TDIF identity exchange is to really allow that interoperability so that there are multiple choices, whether it be a bank or state government or another accredited provider of identity, can come through that network. What's interesting is we never see that data. It's an encrypted network. The data stays with the identity provider, and then the attribute, so you're over 18 or you're an Australian citizen or whatever it is that you need to prove, is all that is then shared with the relying party on the other side. So this interoperability we think is key, which is also why we think it's important from a phasing perspective that the private sector and the public sector go together so that we don't end up with different regimes that don't work together well.
So there's going to be one database that different organisations can access the same data, rather than multiple databases that are trying to link.
What we're suggesting, and what Connect ID, the way it operates today, is we're actually not creating a database in the centre. The data stays where it is today, so we're not creating, and excuse the word, the honeypot of new data. We're actually leveraging data, keeping it where it already is today in a safe, encrypted environment, and allowing other businesses that need to verify an identity or attributes of someone to be able to use the data where it is today to verify that that is correct, and it works through an encrypted exchange. So we're not looking to create multiple sets of data. We're actually really focusing on leaving the data where it is.
It might just be helpful, finally, just for the ABA to kind of clarify some of the basics of the bill there about data and about multiple providers.
Certainly, so in responding to the question, Senator, this bill is establishing a framework for digital ID based on choice, which means that someone can either use, say, for example, the MyGov ID or Connect ID offered by Australia Payment Plus, that where private sector participants involved in the system, that there are robust integrity and governance measures. And then just in addressing your specific question about who has ultimate control, one of the points that we have made in our submission is that there are 6 separate government participants effectively involved in this bill: the ATO, Services Australia, the ACCC, the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, Department of Finance and the Data Standards Chair. Now, it's They need to be involved in the bill, but we do believe it's very important for a centrally controlling and governance mechanism to make sure that there's appropriate coordination between each of those groups as digital ID evolves, to address any issues that arise over time, and to ensure that consumers continue to maintain trust in a system that will ultimately keep them safer from identity theft.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds convoluted, but yeah.
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.